Hello, everybody, and welcome to one more class in our secret garden, the place where you get to practice your English with the thing you love the most, Taylor Swift lyrics. And I've been waiting to get to this song. I've been wanting to talk about it for so long because this song holds a universal truth that I feel is so important for the time that we are living in. And I just want to shout it from the rooftops. And of course, I am talking about Cassandra. And this is going to be another of those songs where it really pays to be a Taylor Swift fan because I am sure that most of you are already aware of the Greek mythology surrounding Cassandra. So here we are studying pop music, and yet we need to know Greek mythology. So get ready because this is going to be a very special class. So before we dive into the song, I do want to go over the background of Cassandra's story and give you all the details so that when we come across those lines in the song, we can discuss the meaning of it surrounding the topic that Taylor chose to use her name. So, for those of you who haven't already learned this, Cassandra was a Trojan princess. She was actually the sister of Hector and Paris, daughter of King Priam and Queen Hecuba. She was incredibly beautiful and very intelligent, and she was loved by none other than the god Apollo. Now, Apollo, guys, was the god of prophecy, music and poetry, and the truth. No coincidence whatsoever. And he was madly in love with Cassandra. So, as a gesture of his love, he granted Cassandra the gift of prophecy, enabling her to see the future. Now, of course, after gifting Cassandra, Apollo expected her to be his. When Cassandra rejected his romantic advances, he cursed her. Now, she would still have the power of prophecy. However, no one would ever believe her. Stop and think about the bigger picture. We just did the prophecy, right, a few classes ago. Now, think about free will and fate, right? She knows the future, but she is powerless to change it, right? There's nothing she can do to alter destiny. Really brings up that idea, right? Can we change the prophecy? Cassandra foresaw the fall of Troy. She foresaw what would happen with Paris and Helen and how that would lead to the Trojan War. She foresaw that the Greeks would use the Trojan horse to infiltrate the city. Despite all her warnings, the Trojans thought she was what? Mad, right? There's nothing like a mad woman, and no one did anything about it. So all of Cassandra's visions came true, and she was powerless to do anything about it. She had to watch the destruction of her city. Then, when Troy fell, she was captured by the Greek hero called Ajax the Lesser, who violated her. And after the war, Cassandra was taken as a slave and concubine by King Agamemnon of Mycenae. She foresaw her own murder along with Agamemnon's. In true to form, they were both killed by Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra. Cassandra has essentially become a literary archetype, right? That person who knows the truth, who warns everybody, but that nobody ever listens to. So there's a lot of symbolism surrounding Cassandra. She represents the tragic consequences of being truthful in a world that refuses to listen. That intersection of free will and fate, as well as critiques of a patriarchal society where women's voices are typically dismissed or suppressed. So, guys, now that you have this background information, we are ready to get into the song. Then we'll be able to dive deeper into each of the lines as they come up.
I was in my new house placing daydreams.
I was at my new house placing daydreams. Something so interesting right off the bat with the first line of the song is something that Taylor loves to do, and that is play around with concrete and abstract nouns, right? So a concrete noun is something that you can physically touch. So she says, I was in my new house placing daydreams, right? But is daydream something physical? Can you hold a daydream and place it somewhere? No, right? So this is what we call an abstract noun. These are going to be thoughts, ideas, right? Anything that is not actually physical. So a new house may symbolize a fresh start, new era, right? Stability. Placing daydreams is going to symbolize all this new hope and optimism with this new moment in her life. This line reminds me of Peace when she says, you paint dreamscapes on the wall. Dreamscapes are very dreamlike paintings. So it's also very beautiful and hopeful. But here she is doing the placing of those daydreams. Whereas in Peace, it was the muse of that song. So this new house may be a new house after that relationship, right? But what happens to all that hope and optimism?
Patching up the crack along the wall.
At the crack along the wall, and we see the crack right there in the music video. Cracks often symbolize flaws or damage that are underneath the surface. So the act of right? So the act of patching is going to be her trying to fix, cover, right? Repair whatever it is that is broken. So this could be her attempt, right, to rebuild her life, her legacy, her reputation, herself.
I pass it and lose track of what I'm saying.
I pass it and lose track of what I'm saying. Everything that she was hopeful for, right? All of her dreams, she kind of loses track of that, right? That it gets cut short. She doesn't get to say what she hopes for her future moving forward.
Cause that's where I was when I got the call.
That's where I was when I got the call. So, a call is symbolic of a pivotal or life altering moment. That's when we get a revelation, right? Bad news, news of a death. And of course, here, if we're going to talk about the Taylor verse, this is most likely a reference to the infamous phone call between Taylor and Kanye West. Now, a lot of people got upset when they realized that this is what this song was going to be about. I was probably one of these people who was like, okay, I think we got everything that we could out of that story. But that was before I actually listened to the entire song. If we think about Taylor's perspective, right? She has been going through the process of re recording all of her old albums, Reputation being an obvious one. And I can only imagine how this has brought to surface so many of those old wounds, right? That she had already gone through, maybe had patched up, right? All the cracks. And yet she has probably found that it still hurts. And if we analyze these songs, right, we've done Thank You, Amy, we're doing Cassandra now, you will see how she is approaching these songs through a much more mature lens and addressing bigger universal truths that are going to be a lot more relevant and important to the public. So I really, really loved what she did with this song in particular, and I can't wait for us to really dissect it. So if you are one of the few people who are tired of the Kimye narrative, know that it's not just about Kimye. This is going to be something much bigger. And reminder that for us, it's just a narrative and something that was on the news. But it was Taylor's life, right? It was her reputation. She literally disappeared, went to go live in another country, thought her life and her career was over. So this is a huge trauma in Taylor's life. And I think that it's important for us to respect that for her.
When the first stone's thrown, they're screaming.
When the first stone's thrown, they're screaming. So here, Taylor's going to continue the pattern of using religious references throughout the torture poets. This being a well known passage from the New Testament of the Bible, specifically John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11, where Jesus says, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." This is such an important passage that for those who are not familiar with it, I'm going to give you a little background about what happened. So, Jesus was teaching at the temple in Jerusalem when the Pharisees brought to him a woman who was caught in the act of adultery. So, she was cheating on her husband. Now, according to the law of Moses of the Old Testament, adultery was punished by stoning. So those religious leaders wanted to trap Jesus by having him either contradict the law or appear merciless, which would prove to be the opposite of what he claimed to be. So they asked Jesus, right? They explained that they caught her cheating and that according to the law, she had to be stoned. So what say he? So Jesus very calmly first starts writing something on the sand with his finger. Then, after being pressed for the answer, he finally says, "Let any one of you who is without sin cast the first stone." And just like that, one by one, each of her accusers starts leaving. And in the end, he is left alone with the woman. So he asks her, "Woman, has no one condemned you?" To which she replies, "No, sir." To which he responds, "Then neither do I. Go and do not sin again." So this highlighted the hypocrisy of the accusers. Everybody is so easy to judge, to condemn, as if they were perfect, as if they are without sin. We are all guilty of something. And that day, Jesus reminded everyone of it. Then she continues.
In the streets, there's a raging riot.
When the first stone's thrown, they're screaming. In the streets, there's a raging riot. Is a picture of mob mentality. I don't know if this ever happened to you, but you know, in school, when somebody starts fighting, then everybody surrounds the fighting, eggs everybody on, like, yeah, fight, fight. And nobody does anything to stop the fight, separate them. We just keep raging with everybody. So everybody says that they're good, they're innocent until the first stone is thrown. Because once that door opens, right, once that one little domino falls, it's like free for all. Everybody feels that they are now allowed. So we judge, we condemn, and things truly, right? I think here in this line, it becomes very evident collective joy of anger when people get together to condemn someone, right? And how quickly people turn to violence. So this is serious, what she's saying. And she continues.
When it's burn the bitch, they're shrieking.
When it's burn the bitch, they're shrieking, right? And to shriek is to give this really loud scream, yell. So here she's continuing, right? The same theme of societal persecution, alluding to witch hunts, which here we can connect to Mad Woman, I Did Something Bad, where Taylor brings up the witch hunts. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the history, witch hunts began in Europe between the 15th and 18th century, and tens of thousands of people, mostly women, were accused of witchcraft and were tortured and executed either by burning or hanging. In the United States, we have the famous Salem witch trials, which took place between 1692 and 93. This took place in colonial Massachusetts and were led by Puritan ministers. And of course, accusations often targeted women who were outspoken, too independent, or unconventional.
When the truth comes out, it's quiet.
When the truth comes out, it's quiet. So the Salem witch trials eventually came to an end when skepticism grew around the validity of the accusations. So people died, there were scandals, but when the truth came out, right, that there actually weren't any witches, right, that wasn't true, did anybody say anything? Did anybody suffer any consequences or repercussions? Right? And is today any different? Many times have we seen this with our own two eyes? This powerful picture that Taylor painted before us, right? Screaming, riots, shrieking, okay? But when the truth comes out, it's quiet. This is commentary on how the uproar dies down once the truth is revealed, right? So when the scandal is out, everybody goes crazy. Everybody points their finger. Everybody adds fuel to the fire. But when the truth is revealed, crickets. I will never forget back in 2019 and 2020, I worked for a political campaign of Marianne Williamson. She was running for president. Marianne is a spiritual author and activist. She has helped so many people throughout her life and career. But when she ran for president, people were like, oh, hell no, you do not belong here. Stay in your lane. And I remember so many articles were written to discredit her that were just one, utterly false, but most of all, just so ridiculous. And I remember on Twitter, like it had millions and millions of views. And then when they would issue a retraction, like telling the truth and correcting all the misinformation, it would be like a couple hundred likes and shares. And we were like, oh my God, like this is insane. Like literally, this happens every single day, especially now with social media. Algorithms and social media platforms are notorious, right, for spreading and amplifying content that garners a lot of attention and interaction, which is always going to be sensationalized content. So anything that is shocking, right, emotional will get shared over less engaging, accurate information. And let's not forget confirmation bias, right? So people are most likely to believe and share information that aligns with their previous beliefs, even if it's false. So this is something that I really want to like hammer down for you guys to be so aware of because this is human nature. It's psychological for us to focus on sensationalism. So just be more careful, tread lightly, don't jump the gun. Take a deep breath, take a few steps back, count to 10 before you go and believe or share something right away. So this phenomenon has a name. Some people call it the truth lag or the misinformation echo. And another example, I don't know if this reached Brazil, but it was huge in the United States. Pizzagate back in 2016. What happened there was that a false conspiracy theory claimed that a Washington, D.C. pizzeria was the center of a child trafficking ring, which was tied to high profile politicians. So the story went viral on social media, which led to a man showing up at the pizzeria armed to investigate. So a huge tragedy could have taken place there. So despite this being debunked and proven false, it had real world consequences. And people to this day will still perpetuate this narrative. So I'm sure you guys have your own stories that you can share with the group, because this is something that happens constantly every day, unfortunately. Have Taylor invoking the name of Cassandra for the first time in the song. And now that you guys are familiar with her story, you understand why, right? So they kill Cassandra first because she feared the worst and tried to tell the town, right? Cassandra tried to warn everybody about the fall of Troy. But Taylor loves to reinvent or reinterpret historical, literary, mythical narratives. And what's really interesting here is that she says they killed Cassandra first. And if we study her story, we know that she didn't die first, actually. Her death occurs after the fall of Troy, so a lot of people died, and in particular of Agamemnon. He dies first, and then she is killed after him. So then you may ask yourself, why did Taylor say this? Why did she say that they killed Cassandra first? And obviously, only Taylor knows, but I'm going to give you guys a few ideas. If we stop and think about it, Cassandra's death begins long before her physical one. The moment that she was cursed, that her voice was silenced, her truth is dismissed, and her credibility destroyed, what more does she have to live for? If no matter what she says will never be believed, right? If her reputation is ruined, it's as if she were already dead. And maybe that's how Taylor felt herself. By claiming that Cassandra was killed first, Taylor might be emphasizing her importance. If Cassandra's warnings had been heeded, tragedy could have been prevented. So her death symbolizes the fact that she couldn't act upon her truth. Like there is nothing she could do. It's as if she didn't exist. She's dead. So for Taylor, this line might reflect the cost of being a woman who speaks out. We know that speaking an uncomfortable truth comes with severe consequences for women. So if we think about the dynamic of how Cassandra was cursed by the fact that she rejected Apollo, a god, this echoes the consequences that a lot of women face when they resist power dynamics or assert their agency. We see this happening to Taylor now, right? She's too big, she's too powerful, it's like there's a limit for women. Women cannot be as powerful as they wish. No, there is a ceiling that we cannot break. So killing Cassandra first places her as a martyr, punished for her courage and foresight. The idea of being killed first could also symbolize the isolating experience of being ahead of one's time. You know, those innovators, like people who knew something before everybody else, and everybody thought that they were crazy and they were shunned from society, only to be acknowledged, right, in the future, in the next generation or so. We can see this with Tesla, for example. Nicholas, not Elon Musk, but that's another idea that I had as well. Filled my cell with snakes. I regret to say, do you believe me now? Do you really think that she is happy to have been proven right? Right? Do you think she feels vindicated? The damage has already been done, right? This is too little, too late. So this is a beautiful wordplay, right, that Taylor does here. So they filled my cell with snakes, which could mean literally her cell phone that was filled with snakes during Snakegate, when she was labeled a snake and was canceled on social media with the Taylor Swift is over party hashtag that was trending around the world. And then we have a cell, right? As in a prison cell filled with literal snakes, maybe. So snakes traditionally symbolize deceit, right? Betrayal, lies, danger. So these are things that she was being accused of when Kim released that edited phone call. Because, guys, think about it, right? This is something that I talk a lot about. Up until that point, Taylor's image, right, her persona that she worked so hard to build was of the good girl, right, of the girl next door. And suddenly, for her to get caught in such a lie, right, such a scandal, everyone was like, this is a farce, right? She was pretending this whole time. Like, she's not real. She is a liar. She is a snake. So it took 4 years, right? The phone call was leaked in 2016. And it wasn't until 2020 when somebody released the full phone call, when Taylor, which is when people finally acknowledged that Taylor had actually been truthful all along. And yet, that was nothing like the uproar and the raging riots and the shrieking of 2016. So when she asked, do you believe me now? Not only was she proven right in regards to what she had said at that time about the phone call and the song, we also had the fallout of Kim and Kanye's marriage and Kanye's own reputation. So again, bittersweet, right? I don't think that she's happy or proud that this has happened. She just wished that people believed her then when she needed them to. So in my tower, weaving nightmares. Look at her using those abstract nouns again. We cannot weave nightmares. So in her tower evokes this image of isolation, entrapment, much like she used in the albatross, if you remember. When she says weaving nightmares, I immediately thought of Rumpelstiltskin, but the story didn't really make sense. And then I remembered Penelope from the Odyssey. And I don't know if you're familiar with her story, but she is actually an unsung heroine of the Odyssey as well, much like her husband Odysseus. So, connecting with the Cassandra narrative and the Greek mythology, we will have Penelope, who was the wife of Odysseus from the Odyssey. So while Odysseus spends 20 years away, 10 years fighting in the Trojan War, and another 10 years trying to return home, Penelope faces her own challenges back home, waiting for her husband to return. So, because Odysseus is gone for so long, nobody has any word of him. They basically assume that he's dead. So, lo and behold, dozens of suitors appear and they begin pressuring Penelope to remarry because obviously they want to gain control of his wealth and his kingdom and his woman. So Penelope is very smart. And in order to delay this whole process, she says that she cannot get married until she finishes weaving a burial shroud for her father in law, Laertes. So by day, she weaves her shroud, but at night, she unravels all her work and undoes it all, prolonging this process for years. So while this act of weaving and unraveling the shroud really is symbolized as her loyalty, her wit, right? She's so smart to do this. But is that not a nightmare for you to have to do this over and over every single day and every single night just to try to protect yourself? So I think there's a little nod to Penelope in this line.
Twisting all my smiles into snarls.
Twisting all my smiles into snarls. We saw snarls in Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, right? When the animal goes like this, show his teeth, right? Trying to defend himself or trying to attack. This also takes us back to happiness when she says, when did your winning smile begin to look like a smirk? Right. So Taylor went from this innocent, beautiful, happy girl to having to create this new persona, right? Look what you made me do in order to protect herself, defend herself. So once she was a princess in the tower waiting for her prince, and now she's turning herself into this witch, right? Plotting revenge.
They say what doesn't kill you makes you aware.
They say what doesn't kill you makes you aware. So look at her again, twisting a very common expression, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, into what doesn't kill you makes you aware. Right? So why did she change this? So while everything that happened to her may not have killed her, to say that it made her stronger might be missing the fact of the lasting damage and trauma that it left on her. Now she is aware and conscious of the evil in the world, how she has to be on guard now all the time, and how she can't trust anyone anymore, and how that completely altered her universe. Leading us to
What happens if it becomes who you are?
what happens if it becomes who you are. This takes me back to that line in The Great War when the muse of the song says, "You have to trust more freely," which takes us back to, right? I don't trust nobody and nobody trusts me. This consumed her in a way that while she is learning her lesson, becoming stronger, this is no way to live, right? You shouldn't be naive like you were before, but never trusting again anyone or anything and letting that damage good relationships with good people that you have in your life um, is terrible. We've seen, right, throughout her discography, things that she has alluded to, how this lack of trust really damaged so many of her relationships. They set my life in flames, right? So she is that witch at the stake being burned, covered in flames. Her life was destroyed, right? She was put through hell. And it's not cool to say, okay, do you believe me now, right? Do you see now? I was right all along, because it doesn't take away the years of pain and isolation that she saw. They knew, right? Who is the they? All right. The whole time that I was on to something. This is an expression, whenever we say that we are onto something, it means that you know something, or your insights or your suspicions is going to lead to a good outcome for you. You're on the way to discovering something, some truth. So they knew I was onto something. They knew I was right. Who are they? Our family, the greed, the Christian chorus line. They all said nothing. So on the surface, we're talking about power dynamics, right? The family. For some reason, this takes me to the monarchy, right? Where you are deemed royalty based on your bloodline. It also suggests betrayal by people who were the closest to Taylor, people whom she considered family, all for what? Material gain, right? For money, the pure greed. And then the Christian chorus line. This is a continuation of that criticism of performative morality, right? The hypocrisy of people who claim to have such Christian values and yet deep down never act as they preach. So when we think about, the burning of the witches or the Inquisition, right? Those were tragedies performed by the church, which go against everything that Jesus taught us, which we saw earlier, right? With cast the first stone, those without sin. But if we're going to look into the Taylor verse, and of course, this is speculation, it could be completely plausible that we are talking about the Kardashian family. I don't know how much influence they have in Brazil, But in the United States, they're extremely influential. They're known for their huge wealth and their ability to dominate the media narrative. So throughout the Snake Egg controversy, the whole family apparently sided with Kanye West because none of them said anything in public to come to Taylor's defense. The Kardashians have built a multi-billion-dollar empire through their reality TV, beauty brands, fashion lines, endorsements, etc. They are often criticized for their emphasis on material wealth and this hyper consumerism mentality, which could be interpreted by some as pure greed. While Kanye started his Sunday service, I don't know if you guys remember, that was a Christian inspired musical event, became super popular. A lot of people don't know that the Kardashian family has links to California Community Church. They have donated significant amounts of money, and critics allege that it's mostly used as a tax haven than a traditional religious institution. So the Christian chorus line, and it's all superficial, it's all hypocritical. So overall, this is Taylor calling out, right, how these powerful institutions, media, the church, the government, prioritize, right, their own narrative, their own wealth over truth. Blood's thick, but nothing like a payroll. That they never spared a prayer for my soul. So blood's thick comes from the expression blood's thicker than water, meaning that familial ties are strong than any other type of relationship, right? You would do anything for your family. But here she's saying, but nothing like a payroll. And to be on the payroll means to be getting paid, right? This is your salary. You are on the company's salary. You are on their payroll. So she's saying this family's case, they care more about money than their family ties. And if we tie in the Christian chorus line, she says, but they never spared a prayer for my soul, right? Whenever we spare something, it's something that we have that is extra. So whenever somebody spares something, it's not like a sacrifice that they're doing. It's like they already have this, it's extra, so they give it to you. That's why a lot of people, if you see like homeless people on the street, they'll ask like, can you spare $1? Right? Do you have $1 to spare? Like, do you have anything left over? Do you have anything extra that I can give, that you can give me? Like, it would never be a sacrifice for these Christian people to pray for her. But she's saying, I bet they never spared a prayer for my soul. So again, highlighting the lack of care or remorse, right? People who said they were your family and then they went ahead and betrayed you for financial gain. So here is when we start getting another sense of the narrative, and I get a more of a feeling of her masters being stolen, right? Of Scott Borchetta and Scooter Braun. Words that I said at first in a morning, no one heard. So whenever we say mark my words, this is like a firm declaration of truth. Like we are certain of what we are saying that is true. And this is something that people will be able to go back to and reaffirm. So she knew they were going to try to take advantage of her, right? She knew that they were going to try to steal her music.
And let me just say that the definition of the toxic male privilege in our industry is people saying, but he's always been nice to me, when I'm raising valid concerns about artists and their rights to own their music. And of course he's nice to you. If you're in this room, you have something he needs. The fact is that private equity is what enabled this man to think, according to his own social media post, that he could buy me. But I'm obviously not going willingly.
If you guys watch Taylor's speech of when she won, I think it was Woman of the Decade for Women in Music, it was about 4 years ago. She was sounding the alarm about artists having the right to own their music and the poison of private equity, right? Private equity is something that is poisoning every industry in the world, especially real estate. Very few people are able to own their homes anymore because private equity firms buy up all of the houses in an entire city and neighborhood, so that you could only rent, and it's so expensive, right? And the same thing is happening to them buying artists' music, right? So they cannot own their own music. This is something that she has been talking about probably for many years. We don't know, but I'm sure it's discussions that have been happening. She's business savvy. We know Taylor knows the business part of the industry, which is another thing that she is criticized for. But that is something that nobody can take away from her, which is something that she said in a morning warning no one heard, right? And here, again, a little play on the words with morning and morning, right? So a lot of people confuse morning with the U with morning of the AM when the sun comes up the next day, right? But this is morning representing the feeling of deep sorrow for someone who has passed away. So, in order for there to be mourning, there needs to be a death. So, we know Cassandra died, and we know Taylor felt like she had died. Or maybe the music died, right? The moment that they were bought off from her, which just reminded me of the song American Pie, right? The other 10-minute song that I love. The day the music died. So bye bye, Miss American Pie. Sorry, guys. So this could symbolize, right, the death of her public image and the trust in people that she once considered allies, once she once considered family, right, like Scott Burchett. So the warning then becomes a cautionary tale, right? And nobody wants to be a cautionary tale, because once you become a cautionary tale, it means that something bad already happened and you are now an example of that. Okay. And you are now an example of said bad thing. Now you warn people, like, don't let what happened to her happen to you. So this reflects, right, the high cost of having a mob mentality, of blind allegiance, right, to false narratives. So by combining mourning and warning becomes a very poetic way to capture the regret and the aftermath of ignoring truths, whether in ancient myths or modern social media controversies. It's really clever wordplay, right, that Taylor uses to tie her own personal experience with timeless themes of betrayal, grief, and vindication. Look, remember, in the beginning, I was patching up the crack. Now I patched up the crack. Okay, so this is a different time frame. She already patched up the crack.
I pass it and lose track of what I'm saying.
But she still loses track of what she was saying.
Cause that's where I was when I lost it all.
That's where it was when I lost it all. So, what were the consequences of that call? That tiny little insignificant 25-minute phone conversation. It led to the downfall of Taylor's entire universe at that time. So here we can really reflect on the weight of something that sometimes we think is so silly and we take for granted, like, oh, she's being cyberbullied. But to the person on the other side of the screen, right, it really hurts. So quiet. There's one thing I forgot to show you that I remembered when she talks about patching up the cracks. Here, look, I patched up the crack along the wall, so you don't see the crack anymore, right? So here, look, we have the crack, but here she patched it. So we no longer have a crack on the wall. But what song did that remind me of? If not, it's time to go. That is also a wall full of cracks to which breaks in your soul. Okay. Then here, when she talks about her master, see, whenever she's talking about um, patching up this crack along the wall, right? She's talking about herself, her soul, right? All the trauma that she acquired throughout this entire ordeal. And I think that she should speak about it as long as her little heart's desire, because only she knows what she went through. And the fact that we have this disease in our society of exactly what she's saying, like the lies blow up and spread like wildfire, and the truth is quiet. This is so, so true. And it's so important for us to be aware and also make noise about the truth, right? This is something that I feel that she feels like nobody paid the price for anything, right? They are, like she says, trash takes itself out. They are falling on themselves and their own character flaws. But as a society, we still favor sensationalism and lies for truth and what's right and virtuous. So, guys, that was Cassandra. Okay, I hope that you guys appreciate this song a little bit more. I hope that you really see the depth of this universal truth that Taylor is trying to spread. If you guys remember, our class and how did it end? And that whole thing about gossip. Remember that movie clip that I showed you with the pillow feather spreading? It's the same idea, right? Lies, gossip, everything that is, superficial, that spreads like crazy. And, people make a huge uproar. But when the truth comes, if it ever comes, right, it comes at such a cost that usually victims are never vindicated. Okay. So, guys, thank you so much. I am so sorry that this class was so late. I had so many problems and technical issues, but hopefully it will be the last time that this ever happens. So I hope you guys forgive me. And I will see you guys next class.